Now, in fewer than 2 weeks, people in Peterborough will be going to the polls to pick a new MP for the city. It follows the ousting of Fiona Onasanya following a recall petition. We're planning to invite all of those standing onto BBC Radio Cambridgeshire during the campaign. This morning, we're talking to Mike Greene, who's standing for the Brexit Party. Morning, Mike.
Morning, Claudice. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Now, the polls have got you as the man to beat in this race in Peterborough, so are you feeling the pressure?
Well, it's very exciting, of course, and I've never done anything unless I thought there was a chance that we could win it. But we're not complacent. There's 2 weeks to go. Things can change in a day in politics, but I do know the people of Peterborough were a big vote leave constituency, and they've felt let down and betrayed by the other parties.
Now, Mike, you're a businessman. People will be wondering how you can support a No Deal Brexit when so many people working in business, working in finance, say that would be a disaster.
Well, it's because I'm a businessman that I do support a no-deal Brexit, and I've put trading teams together and supported trading teams and major companies all over the world. Any negotiation where you take away the fact that if the deal isn't good enough, you walk away becomes a wasted negotiation. You have to have the opportunity to say, we will start again. And if a deal is really bad, we get to the position that was always the mantra that May and other parties use, that no deal is better than a bad deal. There is no reasonable deal that the EU seems to be willing to accept, and no reasonable deal that the government have negotiated. And therefore, I think we find ourselves where a no deal is the best starting point. And I have been in companies, major companies with hundreds of retail outlets, thousands of suppliers, where we've started again, and you have a minor period of disruption, but if the energy is there, and it normally is when you've got suppliers and an opportunity, you actually end up in a much better position. Certainly better than staying in an environment which is abusive and negative and worse than the future.
I mean, you sound hopeful, and I do understand the idea of a no deal when it comes to the negotiation, but do you not worry about the actual consequences of leaving without a deal? It's one thing to speculate that I'm sure we'll all power on and get the energy to do well, but we're dealing with, people's lives, people's jobs here.
Well, the assumption whenever people talk about those losses, those concerns, is that suddenly the supply chain ends, is that suddenly there is no replacement for a European product or a European service. The reality, as we know, and a great example of this has been Tim Martin of Wetherspoons, is that pretty much every product that comes from Europe we can source elsewhere. We can source just as good quality, we can source just as quickly and often cheaper than we're forced to pay through the EU. It seems to me crazy that we would restrict ourselves to reducing and a small block rather than open ourselves up to the world.
What about farmers in the constituency? Are you confident they wouldn't suffer if we left on WTO terms?
Yeah, I live in the middle of a farming area. They're really important to me. I lobbied with them 2 or 3 years ago to stop the council taking back 900 acres of tenant farm just to put solar farms on. Farming's really important. In fact, one of my campaign pledges is to bring farming education to Peterborough, because currently young farmers have to travel an hour and a half either to Norwich or Northampton. If I thought for a minute it would be affected and wouldn't have a more positive future under a British controlled environment, then I wouldn't be supporting this. But what I do know is that most of the funding that came back was less than the funding that went out to Europe, and I believe we will look after our farmers. In fact, any economist that looks forward realises that food poverty is one of our biggest threats, especially compared to even energy poverty. And so we need to get better at growing our food. We need to get better at supporting our farmers, and that's why I made it one of the pledges that I'm making for Peterborough.
Talking about pledges, going out and talking to people on the streets, has your pro-Brexit message been well received in Peterborough?
Yes, it's been well received because I was already knocking on an open door. The people of Peterborough voted 61% to leave. The people of Peterborough want to leave. So when we made it clear that we were the only party that really will deliver Brexit and 100% committed to it as our primary laser focus, it was an easy conversation to have. Every other party is either doing a version of Remain that's cloaked as leave, or making it increasingly clear that they don't intend to leave.
We've got Brexit in the name. We're talking a lot about Brexit. You've said it's your primary focus. People obviously may say that the Brexit Party is a one-trick pony, but what would you want delivered? What else would you want to tackle as the city's MP?
So I've never pursued a career in politics. In fact, even a month ago, I wouldn't have been talking about a career in politics. I've been mostly agitated and inspired to do something for Peterborough. So for me, it's Peterborough first, politics second. There are lots of politicians who jump all around the country looking for a job. If I didn't get Peterborough, I wouldn't consider politics anywhere else. I'm only interested in Peterborough, and therefore the other four areas for me are pretty much education, further education, attracting more business and jobs, and building houses. And they're all things that are pretty much in crisis in the Peterborough area, and Peterborough needs. So I believe that they'll be better furnished in a Brexit environment, in a Leave environment, so let's get Brexit, let's get away from Europe, let's then trade with Europe. It's not that we hate Europe, we just don't like the EU, and we don't believe the EU is the right environment in which to build a better Britain.
Thank you, Mike Greene, who's standing for the Brexit Party. Producer Seb is